Morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of Royce Industries' towering headquarters. Inside, employees moved briskly, their eyes sharp, their tones clipped, the rhythm of a world where mistakes were expensive and time was the ultimate currency. At the top floor, behind an imposing glass desk, Damian Royce was reviewing reports that could make or break the most ambitious merger of his career. His expression was unreadable, a perfect reflection of the man himself. Brilliant, feared, and utterly in control. "Your new assistant has arrived, sir," his secretary announced through the intercom. "Send her in," Damian said, not looking up from his screen. The door opened quietly. A woman entered. Confident posture, composed expression, dressed in the kind of professional elegance that didn't need to draw attention to command it. Isabelle Hart. To Damian, she was just another applicant from the agency, vetted and efficient. To everyone else, she was a new face in the CEO's inner circle. But in truth, Isabelle was something else entirely. An undercover intelligence operative from a covert division, assigned to watch Damian's every move. Her orders were simple. Gain his trust, stay close, and make sure he doesn't destroy something bigger than his empire. She approached the desk, offering a calm smile. "Mr. Royce. Isabelle Hart. It's an honor to be on your team." Damian glanced up, assessing her in a single sweep, the precision in her voice, the control in her body language. He had met thousands of people who wanted something from him. She was different. "Let's see if that honor lasts the week," he said dryly, motioning toward the chair opposite him. "This job isn't about schedules and coffee runs. It's about survival." Isabelle tilted her head slightly, unfazed. "Then I'll survive." For a moment, silence stretched between them, not awkward, but charged. Damian's gaze lingered, searching for weakness. Isabelle met it head-on, her composure flawless. "Good," Damian said finally. "Because I don't have time for mistakes." He returned to his screen, testing her resolve with deliberate indifference. Isabelle took a seat and began reviewing the files he handed over. Financial statements, merger documents, and confidential notes about his partners. But even as she scanned the pages, her mind was elsewhere. "He's sharp. Too sharp." Damian's reputation preceded him. Ruthless in negotiation, merciless in business, yet brilliant enough to turn enemies into assets. Her briefing had warned her, never underestimate Damian Royce. But sitting across from him, Isabelle realized the reports hadn't captured his presence. There was a gravity about him, the kind that made the air feel thinner. Hours passed in quiet tension. She memorized his calendar, handled correspondence, and matched his pace seamlessly. Every movement she made was calculated, professional enough to blend in, distant enough to avoid suspicion. By late afternoon, Damian leaned back in his chair, studying her again. "You're quick," he said. "Most new hires trip over themselves the first day." "I adapt fast," Isabelle replied with a faint smile. "Occupational habit." He raised an eyebrow. "What was your occupation before this?" There it was, the test. Isabelle didn't blink. Administrative coordinator. Corporate liaison. Her tone was effortless, her fabricated resume airtight. Damian's eyes lingered on her for a second longer than necessary. Then he nodded. "Good. Keep that habit. You'll need it." When Isabelle finally left the office that evening, the city skyline glowed below. Elegant, dangerous, alive. She took a quiet breath, pulling a small encrypted device from her bag. "This is Agent Hart," she whispered into it. Assignment commenced. Target appears observant, methodical, possibly aware of surveillance. Proceeding with caution. A voice crackled in her ear. "Remember, Agent, you're not there to protect him, you're there to watch him." Her gaze drifted back toward the top floor where Damian's lights still burned through the night. "Understood," she said softly. "But that might be harder than it sounds." The next morning, Royce Industries was buzzing with quiet tension. Word of the impending merger had spread through the upper floors like wildfire, whispered in corridors, discussed over coffee, analyzed by those brave enough to speculate. Isabelle moved through it all like a calm current against a storm. Her clipboard in hand, tablet at her side, she memorized faces, gestures, patterns, every small detail that might hint at a threat. She wasn't just Damian Royce's assistant. She was an observer, a silent sentinel hidden in plain sight. Inside the boardroom, Damian stood at the head of a long table. his voice measured but commanding. The merger with Helios Dynamics isn't a gamble, he said, scanning the faces of his executives. It's a calculated move. If anyone here doubts that, you're welcome to find the exit. No one moved. Isabelle sat quietly near the end of the table, typing notes while her eyes did the real work, scanning the team, reading micro-expressions. One executive, a man named Grant Lewis, looked particularly uneasy. Every time Damian spoke, Grant avoided eye contact, fidgeting with his pen. Damian noticed too. "Lewis," he said suddenly, his tone sharp. "You've been uncharacteristically silent. Anything to share?" Grant froze. "And no, sir. Everything's proceeding as planned." "Good," Damian replied, but his gaze lingered. "Because if something isn't proceeding as planned, I intend to find out before the press does." A tense silence fell. Isabelle caught the faintest twitch of Grant's jaw, a tell. Something was wrong. When the meeting ended, she approached Damian with her notes. "Would you like me to file these summaries, sir?" she asked, her tone perfectly professional. He glanced at her. "Later. I want you to cross-reference everyone's financial records and project logs." Quietly. She hesitated just long enough to seem normal. "Of course." As soon as Damian left the room, Isabelle slipped away to her desk. Within minutes, her fingers danced across her tablet, pulling encrypted data streams from hidden sources her assistant access shouldn't have allowed. The further she dug, the clearer it became. Someone inside Royce Industries was leaking merger information. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "You work fast," Damian said from behind her. Isabelle's pulse spiked, but she didn't turn immediately. Efficiency is part of the job. He stepped closer, his reflection appearing beside hers in the glass wall. "You weren't hired to investigate my staff." She met his gaze in the reflection. "Then perhaps you shouldn't have told me to cross-reference their files." A corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile, but something like approval. "Touché." The air between them tightened. Neither moved, neither looked away. Damian finally broke the silence. "You're different, Ms. Hart. You don't flinch. You don't defer. That's rare." "Maybe you just intimidate the wrong people," she replied softly. He turned fully toward her then, studying her face. For a brief moment, his composure faltered, revealing something human beneath the control. Curiosity, maybe even intrigue. "Keep doing what you're doing," he said finally. "But if you're digging where you shouldn't, you'll find out how ruthless I can be." With that, he left her in the quiet hum of the office, his warning hanging in the air like static. That night, long after the lights dimmed, Isabelle remained at her desk. Her encrypted device buzzed softly. A secure transmission. "Report," came her handler's voice. "Royce suspects internal leaks," she whispered. "I believe he's being set up. Possibly from within his board. Stay close. Protect the information. Not him." Her eyes flicked toward Damian's closed office door, where a faint light still glowed under the frame. "Understood," she said quietly. But even as she ended the call, Isabelle wasn't sure she believed herself. For the first time since her mission began, she wasn't just monitoring Damian Royce. She was beginning to care what happened to him. Rain streaked the glass walls of Royce Industries, turning the city lights into ribbons of color against the dark. Most of the staff had long gone home, but 2 lights still burned on the top floor, one in Damian Royce's office, and one across from it, where Isabelle Hart worked silently through her second consecutive night. Stacks of merger documents lay open before her, digital contracts and encrypted files scrolling across her monitor. But her focus wasn't just on the paperwork. Somewhere in the fine print, buried deep in the data transfers, something didn't fit. Signatures that didn't match, financial timestamps that had been subtly altered. The pattern was too deliberate to be an accident. She was still comparing timestamps when a voice behind her made her freeze. "You don't sleep either, I see." Damian stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms, the faintest hint of fatigue softening his usually impenetrable features. "Couldn't," Isabelle replied, keeping her tone even. "Numbers didn't add up. I was double-checking before the morning presentation." He stepped closer, glancing at the data on her screen. "Those figures from Helios?" "Yes. Some entries are inconsistent." Damian leaned in, scanning the file. Isabelle caught the faint scent of his cologne. Subtle, expensive, grounded in cedar and something darker. It shouldn't have affected her, but it did. Her pulse betrayed her. "You noticed it too," she said quietly. "Of course," he replied, eyes still fixed on the data. "But I wanted to see how long it would take for you to catch it." Isabelle arched an eyebrow. "You were testing me?" "Always," Damian said. "Trust is expensive. I don't give it away." Their eyes met, his gaze sharp and unreadable, hers steady, defiant. For a heartbeat, silence filled the office, punctuated only by the soft hum of the city beyond. Then, without breaking eye contact, Damian walked past her and poured 2 glasses of water. "You've done impressive work," he said, handing her one. "Most people drown in this merger within a week." "Maybe I'm a better swimmer," Isabelle replied, taking the glass. Damian's mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile. "Or maybe you're not who you say you are." The words hit harder than she expected. Isabelle's fingers tightened around the glass. "What's that supposed to mean?" He took a sip of water, watching her carefully. "You notice details others miss. You anticipate things before I say them. You read people too well. No assistant learns that in an office." Isabelle forced a small professional smile. "You hired me to notice things, didn't you?" Damian tilted his head, studying her. "Maybe. Or maybe I wanted to see how long it would take for you to realize that I notice things too." Her breath caught. There it was again, the sharp edge of intellect, the subtle warning behind his calm demeanor. Damian Royce wasn't just ruthless in business. He was observant, dangerous, aware. "Careful, Ms. Hart," he said quietly, his tone carrying weight. "Secrets don't survive long here." "Neither do people who keep them," she returned, before she could stop herself. For a moment, he just looked at her. Then he laughed, low and unexpected. "I think I might actually like you." Isabelle tried not to show her surprise. "That's reassuring." "It should be," he said, his tone half amusement, half threat. Hours passed. The rain intensified outside as the two of them worked side by side, deciphering figures, analyzing patterns, and trading glances that said more than either dared to admit. By the time they finalized their report, it was well past midnight. Damian straightened, stretching slightly. "You've saved me 3 days of damage control," he said. "Remind me to double your salary." "I'm not here for the money," Isabelle replied before thinking. Damian looked at her, intrigued. "Then what are you here for?" The question hung in the air. Simple, yet impossibly dangerous. Isabelle swallowed the truth and forced a faint smile. "Experience," she lied smoothly. "Experience," he repeated, still watching her. "Somehow I doubt that." He turned toward the window, gazing at the skyline. "Whatever your reasons, keep them. Just don't let them get in the way of business." As he walked back to his desk, Isabelle exhaled quietly, her pulse finally slowing. She had come here to watch him. To protect the mission. To keep secrets. But somewhere between the data and the danger, she had started to care. Not just about the task but about the man himself. And that was the most dangerous mistake she could make. Morning sunlight flooded the glass conference room as the executives gathered for another high-level meeting. The atmosphere was sharp. Coffee, tension, and ambition mixing in equal measure. Damian Royce entered last, his presence commanding instant silence. Behind him, Isabelle followed, poised and collected, tablet in hand. Her every step was measured. Calm on the surface, alert underneath. She had sensed it the moment she arrived that morning. Something in the air was different. "Let's begin," Damian said, settling at the head of the table. "Helios Dynamics has proposed a new clause in the merger. One that reallocates cybersecurity oversight to their board." "I'm not signing that." Murmurs rippled through the room. Isabelle scanned the faces. Grant Lewis, the same executive who'd looked uneasy before, was unusually quiet, avoiding Damian's eyes again. But this time, his discomfort carried a different shade. Anticipation. Damian continued, "Someone on this team authorized a pre-draft of that clause without my consent. I want to know who." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Grant spoke, his tone a little too casual. "Perhaps you should ask your new assistant. She's been unusually close to your files." Every gaze in the room turned to Isabelle. Her heartbeat kicked hard against her ribs, but her expression didn't falter. "All data access I've performed has been under Mr. Royce's instruction," she said smoothly. "Every edit is logged and traceable." Grant leaned back in his chair, smirking slightly. "Of course it is. Still, a lot of confidential files have been moving around lately. Some of us just want to make sure the right people are handling them." Damian's eyes narrowed. "Watch your words, Lewis." Grant shrugged, unbothered. "I'm just suggesting caution. You brought her in out of nowhere. None of us know where she came from." The words hit too close to the truth. Isabelle forced herself to remain composed, meeting Grant's gaze head-on. "If you're implying misconduct, I'd be happy to show my work. Would you be willing to do the same?" Grant stiffened, his smirk vanishing. Damian's lips twitched with restrained amusement. "I think we're done here. Ms. Hart's performance speaks for itself. If anyone has an issue, they can take it up with me directly." No one dared to respond. As the meeting dispersed, Damian lingered, his gaze resting on Isabelle. "You handled that well," he said finally. "I handled the truth," she replied quietly. He studied her for a moment, then added, "Lewis won't forget this. Be careful." "I can take care of myself," she said. "I don't doubt that," Damian said, his tone low. "But you're in my world now, Ms. Hart. And here, even the best players get burned." Later that afternoon, Isabelle sat in her small office space, tension still humming beneath her skin. Her communicator buzzed, a coded message. She read it quickly, her pulse quickening. "We have intel. Helios Dynamics has a mole inside Royce Industries. Possible connection. Grant Lewis. Maintain cover. Protect the target until confirmation." She stared at the message, a wave of unease washing over her. Protect the target. Damian. The line she had been trained to keep clear, between mission and emotion, blurred a little more. She was so deep in thought that she didn't hear Damian approach until he spoke. "You're distracted." She looked up sharply. "Just processing data from this morning's meeting." He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Grant's a snake. You rattled him." "That's good. Or bad," Isabelle countered softly. "Cornered people bite." A faint smile curved his lips. "So do I." Their eyes met, the air between them shifting. It wasn't professional anymore. It hadn't been for a while. Damian's gaze lingered a little too long, as though searching her for something. An answer, a truth, a weakness. "Tell me something," he said suddenly. "Where did you work before this?" "Really?" The question landed like a knife. Isabelle hesitated, just a fraction too long. "Consulting," she said smoothly. "Corporate strategy. Mostly short-term contracts." Damian's eyes narrowed slightly. Perceptive. Calculating. "You don't strike me as someone who leaves things half-finished." Her pulse quickened. "Sometimes walking away is the only way to finish." He tilted his head, intrigued. "Maybe. Or maybe you just don't want people to know how much you're really involved." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then slipped it into his pocket. "We'll continue this later," he said, his tone unreadable. "Good work today, Ms. Hart." When he left, Isabelle released the breath she'd been holding. She turned back to her tablet, where her communicator still blinked faintly. Grant Lewis was the mole. Damian was the target. And Isabelle Hart, the woman sent to protect him, was one misstep away from being exposed herself. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and crystal, the kind of setting where power and money moved unseen between champagne glasses. It was the annual Royce Foundation Gala, a social event designed to flaunt influence under the guise of charity. Damian Royce, in a tailored black suit, commanded every room he entered. His presence was a mix of confidence and quiet danger. People didn't just look at him, they watched him. Tonight, though, his eyes weren't on the board members or investors. They were on her. Isabelle Hart descended the marble staircase like a secret wrapped in silk. Her dark gown shimmered under the lights, elegant but understated, professional enough for an assistant, yet impossible to ignore. Damian caught himself staring longer than he should. "Try not to look like you're about to interrogate the guests," she teased softly as she approached him. He smirked. "I don't interrogate. I observe. From the way people scatter, I'd say they can't tell the difference." His smirk deepened. "And yet you're still here." "Someone has to make sure you survive the night," she replied, half joking, half true. Neither knew that her words would prove prophetic. As the evening unfolded, the ballroom filled with laughter and polite applause. Isabelle stayed near Damian's side, monitoring conversations, tracking potential threats, and trying not to notice how close he stood to her. Every subtle brush of his arm against hers sent a quiet current through her chest. "Mr. Royce," a voice interrupted. "Grant Lewis," his tone dripping with false charm. "Didn't expect to see your assistant so involved in corporate affairs." Isabelle smiled coolly. "Someone has to keep the paperwork in order." "You wouldn't know how much that matters, would you, Mr. Lewis?" Grant's smirk faltered for a moment before returning. "Careful, Ms. Hart. Words like that can cost you a job." "Then it's a good thing I'm good at mine," she replied, her tone calm but razor-edged. Damian's expression didn't change, but his eyes gleamed with quiet approval. As Grant walked away, Damian leaned closer. "You really don't fear anyone, do you?" "Should I?" she asked, voice soft. He studied her face for a moment, his tone dropping low. "Not unless you plan on making me your enemy." She met his gaze without blinking. "Depends on how you define enemy." Their eyes locked. The noise of the gala faded. For a moment, it was just them, standing in the golden glow of chandeliers, pretending not to feel what was simmering just beneath the surface. Then, suddenly, a commotion. A glass shattered across the room. A man near the balcony stumbled forward, clutching his chest, a drink spilling from his hand. Chaos erupted as guests gasped and security rushed in. Isabelle's instincts kicked in instantly. "Stay here," she whispered to Damian, but he was already moving toward the disturbance. She followed, slipping between guests, her trained eyes scanning the crowd. The man on the floor wasn't having a medical emergency. He'd been injected. A thin puncture mark near his collarbone told her that much. Whoever did it was already gone. Damian crouched beside the man, eyes narrowing. "Who was he?" "Helios Dynamics chief analyst," Isabelle answered, voice low. "One of the people negotiating your data clause." Damian looked up sharply, realization dawning. "Then this wasn't random." She nodded, scanning the exits. Someone wanted to send a message. Security swarmed the scene, escorting guests out. The gala dissolved into confusion, but Damian and Isabelle stayed behind in the quiet aftermath, the lights now dimmed, the music gone. "You knew what that was," Damian said finally, his tone unreadable. She turned toward him. "I've seen things like it before." He stepped closer, eyes dark. "Who are you really, Isabelle?" The sound of her name from his lips, quiet, deliberate, made her heart stumble. She wanted to tell him. For one wild, reckless second, she almost did. But her handler's words echoed in her head. "Protect the target. Don't reveal your cover." "I'm your assistant," she said, forcing her voice steady. "Nothing more." Damian's gaze searched her face. "You're lying." She didn't deny it. She couldn't. He took another step, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "Whoever you are, you just saved me from something bigger than a business deal. That makes us even." "I wasn't keeping score," she murmured. "Maybe you should." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The air between them was heavy with things unsaid. Suspicion, attraction, fear. Then, without warning, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the fading glow of the ballroom. When he was gone, Isabelle pressed a hand against her chest, feeling her pulse racing beneath her skin. She had come here to protect Damian Royce. But tonight proved one thing. Whoever was behind the attacks wasn't just after his company. They were after him. And as the danger grew closer, so did something far more unpredictable, the pull between them. By dawn, the Royce Tower was silent again, except for the faint hum of computers and the echo of rain against the windows. Isabelle sat at her desk, exhaustion shadowing her eyes. She hadn't slept. She'd spent the entire night combing through security feeds, cross-referencing guest lists from the gala. But whoever had attacked Helios's analyst had known exactly where the cameras were. Every crucial angle was mysteriously corrupted. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. This was no coincidence. Someone inside the company had access to the feeds. Still working. Damian's voice made her look up. He stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up again. A familiar look that meant he'd been awake as long as she had. Trying to find answers, she said. The footage is useless. Someone wiped it clean. He walked closer, stopping beside her desk. You think it's connected to the merger? I know it is, she said softly. The man who was attacked handled your cybersecurity contracts. Someone didn't want him talking. Damian's jaw tightened. Lewis. Her eyes lifted. You're certain? No, he said, staring at the skyline. But he's been too nervous since the deal began. He's hiding something. He turned to face her fully. You've seen it too, haven't you? She hesitated. The truth was dangerous. Every answer she gave risked her cover. But Damian's eyes were sharp. Missing nothing. Yes, she said finally. There's a pattern in his communications. Encrypted transfers, hidden through offshore accounts. His brows rose slightly. That's a lot of detail for an assistant to uncover. Isabelle froze. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Who taught you to dig that deep, Miss Hart? She tried to hold his gaze, but the air between them felt charged. Not just with suspicion, but with something more volatile. I told you, she said quietly. I'm thorough. Damian's tone dropped. You're something else entirely. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. What is it? Isabelle asked. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he handed her the screen. It was an email, anonymous, with one attached image. A still frame from security footage. Of her. Standing near the balcony at the gala, only moments before the attack. Her blood ran cold. That's been altered, she said instantly. I know, Damian replied, eyes fixed on her face. But someone wants me to think otherwise. He turned the screen off. This is what they do. Create doubt, twist truth into lies. You believe me? She asked before she could stop herself. His gaze met hers. Dark, searching. If I didn't, you'd already be gone. Relief warred with guilt. She wanted to tell him everything. About the agency. The mission. The reason she'd been sent. But before she could find the words, the intercom crackled. Mr. Royce. The receptionist's voice trembled. Security breach in the sub-level servers. Someone's accessing merger files. Damian's composure vanished in an instant. Lock the floors. No one leaves the building. He turned to Isabelle. Come with me. They raced down the corridor toward the elevators. The building was eerily quiet. Too quiet. When they reached the sublevel, the doors opened to darkness. Damian drew a small flashlight from his pocket. Stay behind me. She ignored the order. I'm not helpless. He shot her a brief look, the kind that said he knew better than to argue. Together, they moved through the corridor until they reached the server room. The reinforced door had been bypassed with professional precision. Inside, a terminal glowed. Lines of code flickered on the screen. A live data transfer already in progress. Isabelle stepped forward, scanning the encryption. Someone's rerouting your entire merger database to an external server, she said quickly. If they finish, everything, the contracts, your research, even personal records, will be gone. Can you stop it? Damian asked. She hesitated for half a second. The system was advanced, the kind of tech only government or high-level corporate spies used. I can try, she said, taking control of the terminal. He watched her fingers move. Swift, precise, confident. You've done this before, he said quietly. Do you want me to stop explaining or stop typing? Just don't stop. Within seconds, the transfer froze, and the terminal locked down. It's done, she said breathless. They won't get anything more. Damian exhaled slowly. Impressive. Then the screen blinked. One final message appeared in blood-red text. You can't protect him forever. Damian looked at her. They know you're helping me. Isabelle's voice dropped to a whisper. Then it's already begun. That night, as the city lights flickered outside his office, Damian stood by the window, his reflection overlapping hers. You saved my company today, he said quietly. And you're still lying to me. Isabelle met his gaze in the glass. Both can be true. He turned to face her. Who are you really, Isabelle? She held his stare, the truth burning on her tongue, the secret pressing against her ribs. Someone who's already in too deep, she whispered. And before either could say another word, the lights in the building flickered, then went out. The building went black. For a split second, there was silence, the kind that came just before chaos. Then the emergency lights flickered to life, painting the corridor in red and white. Backup generators should have kicked in immediately, Damian muttered, scanning the hallway. This isn't a random outage. It's a breach, Isabelle said, already moving. They're using the power failure as cover. She tapped her earpiece. Nothing. No signal. Whoever had orchestrated this knew exactly how to cut off communication. Stay close, Damian said, his voice low, commanding. Isabelle almost laughed under her breath. You do realize that's usually my line. They made their way toward the stairwell, every step echoing against the concrete. The deeper they descended, the more the red light painted the world in danger. Halfway down, Damian froze. Wait. From below, faint footsteps. Not hurried, methodical. Whoever was down there wasn't panicking. They were hunting. Damian motioned for Isabelle to stay back. She ignored him and pressed her back to the wall, scanning the lower landing. A shadow moved. Isabelle reacted instantly, grabbing Damian's arm and pulling him aside just as a silenced bullet hit the metal railing with a sharp ping. Still think I should stay behind? She hissed. Damian didn't answer. He was already scanning the angles, eyes sharp. How many? 2, maybe 3, she whispered. Trained. They're not random intruders. I gathered. They ducked into a side passage, the narrow hall lit only by emergency lights. Isabelle pulled a small flash drive from her pocket and handed it to him. What's this? Damian asked. Backup of your entire merger database, she said quickly. If we don't make it out, destroy it. Don't let it fall into anyone's hands. He stared at the drive, then at her. You planned for this. I planned for everything. Except me, he said softly. The words caught her off guard. More than the gunfire ever could. For a moment, she couldn't look at him. You shouldn't make this personal. It already is. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. Damian grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward a maintenance door. Inside, the narrow room was pitch black except for the faint light spilling through the vent. They stood pressed close, their breaths mingling in the dark. Isabelle could feel his heartbeat against her arm. Steady, strong, unyielding. Who are they? He asked quietly. People who want you silenced, she replied. They're after your data, the same ones who killed Helios's analyst. Then you do know what this is really about. Her pulse jumped. Damian, please. Don't, he said, his voice low but sharp. No more half-truths. Who sent you here? She turned away, torn between her orders and her conscience. If I tell you, everything changes. It already has. The silence stretched. Then finally, Isabelle exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not your assistant. I'm Government Intelligence, Covert Operations Division. They sent me here because your merger involves a company under investigation for data trafficking. Someone inside Royce Industries was helping them, and I was sent to find out who. Damian's jaw tightened. So all this, the files, the late nights, the trust, it was all a lie? It started that way, she said softly. But it isn't anymore. He laughed once, bitterly. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything, she said, meeting his gaze. But I've risked my cover and my life to protect you. That has to mean something. For a long moment, Damian said nothing. The anger in his eyes softened. Not gone, but tempered by something else. You should have told me, he said finally. I wanted to, she admitted. But if you'd known, you'd have pushed me away. And I couldn't let that happen. He looked at her for a long, unreadable second. Then a faint noise outside broke the silence. We're out of time, Isabelle whispered. Damian nodded, his expression all business again. Then we move. Together. They slipped out of the maintenance room, navigating the dim halls until they reached the server room again. The main console was still running. But now, another message blinked across the screen. Hellos. Royce. Nice of you to bring a spy to the party. Damian's jaw clenched. They know who you are. Then we end this now, Isabelle said, stepping toward the terminal. Before they take everything. Damian caught her arm. If you do this, you'll expose yourself completely. No more hiding. She looked at him, really looked at him. Maybe it's time I stop hiding. And before he could stop her, Isabelle started typing. Fast, precise, fearless. The screen flooded with code as she launched a trace through the system, her hands moving like she'd done it 1,000 times before. When the trace hit the source, she froze. The signal wasn't coming from Helios. It was coming from inside Royce Industries. She turned toward Damian, her voice barely a whisper. It's not Lewis. His eyes narrowed. Then who? The lights flickered again, and from behind them, a voice said calmly. Me. The voice behind them was calm. Too calm. Isabelle spun around, her body instinctively shifting into defense mode. Grant Lewis stood at the doorway, gun in hand, the red emergency light casting harsh shadows across his face. I knew you were too smart for an assistant, he said with a smirk. Didn't take you long to put the pieces together. Damian's eyes were cold. You were behind the breach. The attack at the gala. Grant tilted his head. You make it sound so dramatic. I was simply doing business. Helios offered more than you ever would, Damian. Your merger, your company. All of it was leverage. You sold access to classified data, Isabelle said sharply. That's treason under international law. Grant chuckled. And yet here I am. Still breathing. He raised the gun slightly. Step away from the console. Isabelle stayed perfectly still. Her mind raced. The trace was still running behind her. If she could keep him talking for another 30 seconds, the transmission would complete, sending his location to her agency. You really think Helios will protect you? She said. You're a loose end now. The moment this deal closes, they'll erase you. Grant smirked. Then I'll make sure I take something valuable with me. Like Royce. Damian didn't flinch. You won't pull that trigger, Grant. Won't I? The tension thickened, the hum of the servers the only sound. Isabelle's pulse hammered in her ears. She needed to distract him. Just long enough. Damian, she said quietly, not taking her eyes off Grant. When I say move, move. Grant's finger twitched on the trigger. Don't try anything stupid. Now. Isabelle shouted. Damian lunged to the side as Isabelle kicked the desk hard, sending the metal chair crashing into Grant's knees. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the confined space. Glass shattered, sparks flew from a nearby console. Grant stumbled, swearing, and fired again. The bullet grazed Isabelle's arm as she dove for cover. Pain flared hot, but she bit it back and rolled behind the server bank. Damian seized a fallen metal rod and swung, knocking the gun from Grant's hand. The weapon clattered across the floor, spinning to a stop near Isabelle. Grant lunged for it, but Isabelle was faster. She kicked it away, then drove her elbow into his side. He doubled over, gasping. Within seconds, Damian had him pinned against the wall, fury darkening his expression. You tried to destroy everything I built, he said through gritted teeth. Grant laughed weakly. Not everything. Just you. Damian's fist connected with his jaw, not out of rage, but finality. Grant crumpled to the floor. Isabelle winced as she pressed her hand against her bleeding arm, adrenaline still burning through her veins. Damian turned to her immediately. You're hurt. I've had worse, she said, forcing a wry smile. He grabbed a cloth from the desk and wrapped it around her arm. His movements were firm but gentle, his jaw tense. You shouldn't have jumped in like that. Would you rather I let him shoot you? He looked up, meeting her eyes, and in that charged silence, everything they'd avoided saying was suddenly there, unspoken but undeniable. The trace beeped softly on the terminal. Isabelle turned toward it. The signal was complete. Data uploaded, location sent. Reinforcements would arrive within minutes. It's over, she said quietly. He won't get far. Damian didn't answer right away. Instead, he exhaled slowly and leaned against the desk beside her. The red emergency lights bathed the room in a surreal glow. So that's it, he asked. You'll hand him over to your agency and disappear? That's the plan, she said softly. He gave a humorless smile. Of course it is. Everything with you is a plan. Damian. No, he interrupted, voice low but steady. I should have known from the beginning. You were too precise. Too careful. Every word calculated. She swallowed hard. It wasn't all calculated. He looked at her, and she could see the conflict in his eyes. Anger, confusion, and something else. Something dangerously close to longing. Then tell me what was real, he said quietly. She hesitated. The nights in the office. The work. The trust. You. For a moment, neither breathed. Then Damian reached out, brushing his thumb against her wrist, just above the bandage. His touch was hesitant, questioning. You could have told me, he said finally. I wanted to, she whispered. But I didn't know how to stop being what I was trained to be. And what are you now? Someone who wishes she could stay. The sound of sirens grew faintly in the distance, growing louder by the second. Isabelle turned toward the door, her eyes flickering with guilt and resolve. They'll be here soon, she said. My team. Once they take Louis, they'll want me debriefed. Damian stood. And then, I'll be gone. He stared at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. You saved me, Isabelle. But you also broke something I didn't know could still break. Her throat tightened. I'm sorry. He smiled faintly, not bitterly, but with quiet resignation. Don't be. You taught me that not every betrayal destroys. Some reveal the truth. The doors burst open as agents swept in, securing the room. Isabelle turned to look at him one last time. The ruthless CEO and the spy who wasn't supposed to care. Their eyes met across the chaos. No words. Just a silent understanding. The mission was over. But the story between them wasn't. The city skyline glittered under a late spring sunset, casting gold and amber across the towering glass of Royce Industries. The chaos of the past weeks, the attacks, betrayals, and near-deaths, had settled into a fragile calm. Damian Royce stood in his office, reviewing the final merger reports. Everything had been restored. Contracts were intact, threats neutralized. The company that almost fell into chaos was now steadier than ever. But as precise as the business world had become, Damian found himself distracted by the one variable he couldn't calculate. Isabelle Hart. She hadn't returned to the office since the final confrontation with Grant Lewis. Her cover as a government agent remained active, and she was due to report for debriefing. Yet Damian couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she moved, the quiet confidence in her eyes, the subtle warmth she hadn't intended to show. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. Come in, he called. The door opened, and she stepped inside, dressed in professional attire as always, but softer somehow, the edges of the spy hardened by mission still visible, yet something human peeking through. Mr. Royce, she said, voice formal. I've completed the debriefing with my agency. Everything has been cleared on your side. No leaks remain. Louis has been apprehended. Damian didn't move from his desk. Instead, he studied her quietly, noting how tense yet composed she appeared. And you? He asked simply. I'm fine, she replied. But he could see the faint fatigue around her eyes, the subtle weight of weeks spent in constant danger. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Sit. For once. Just for a few minutes. No files, no crises, no spies. She hesitated, habit and duty warring with curiosity, then sat, placing her hands neatly on her lap. The silence stretched. Damian finally spoke. Voice measured. I owe you more than thanks, Isabelle. You saved this company. You saved me. And yet, you're gone tomorrow. Her gaze dropped. It's my job. The agency doesn't allow attachments. Then maybe it's time they reconsidered, he said softly. I don't care about protocol. I care about you. Her head lifted, meeting his eyes. For the first time, the wall between their worlds felt fragile. Possible to breach. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. I can't stay. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk. And yet, I won't let you walk away without knowing what this means. To me. Her pulse quickened. She could feel the weight of everything unsaid, the tension that had grown through shared danger, through late nights, through moments when neither could fully control their feelings. You were never supposed to care, she said quietly. That was the rule. I don't care about the rules, he said, voice low, urgent. I care about the truth. And the truth is, I don't want to lose you. Her hands trembled slightly. Damian. He reached across the desk, gently taking her hand. His touch was firm, reassuring, yet tinged with the intensity of weeks spent facing danger together. You've already risked everything for me, he continued. Now it's my turn. Whatever happens next, I don't want to be without you. She looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the raw honesty that no mission could mask. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond the agency, beyond secrets. I never thought I could, she started, voice barely audible. Choose for myself. Then choose, he said softly. Choose us. Not the mission. Not the rules. Just us. Her breath caught. A fragile smile appeared on her lips. I choose you. He smiled in return, a mixture of relief, tenderness, and quiet triumph. The tension that had defined their days, the danger, the secrets, the unspoken words, seemed to lift in that single moment. Outside, the city continued its relentless pulse, indifferent to human affairs. But inside Royce Industries, a different rhythm had begun. One defined not by corporate deals or hidden threats, but by something far rarer. Trust, understanding, and connection. Damian squeezed her hand gently. Then stay. Not as an assistant. Not as a spy. Stay as whatever we are. She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to echo through the office, replacing months of tension with a fragile joy. Whatever we are, she repeated. For the first time since their paths crossed, danger, duty, and deception mattered little. There was only this, a moment of clarity, a chance to rebuild what had been nearly lost. And as the sunset bathed the office in gold, Damian and Isabelle finally allowed themselves to step beyond the shadows. The merger had succeeded. The betrayal had been stopped. But the true victory, the one that neither data nor protocol could measure, was this: two hearts finally aligned. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original novel stories. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.